merciful God. We've got too many people who say, we're done with this church because of the evil that is done in it. No, this is still God's church. And because of all this, we make a sure covenant and write it, and our princes and Levites and priests and seal it. To separate, to keep the Sabbath, and to pay tithes. These are all the things we have to make right in the church. Everyone having knowledge and having understanding, they clave to their children, their nobles, and they entered into a curse and an oath to walk in God's law, which was given by Moses. So our church must make a covenant to make right that which is wrong. And that we would not give our daughters unto the people of the land, nor take their daughters for our sons. Whew, that's hard. That's hard. And if the people of the land bring ware or any victuals on the Sabbath day to sell, we would not buy it from them on the Sabbath or on the holy day, and we would leave the seventh year and the exaction of every debt. And that we would bring the first fruits, and then we would pay the tithes. If we don't pay tithes, how can we expect the blessings of God? In my own life, when I came into this church, and I heard about the tithing system, I thought this is a money-making racket. I'm not going to pay tithe. I need my money. I earn little enough. I can't afford still to pay 10%. I'm going to leave it. And then I went through my day, and my conscience worked and bothered me. And I talked with my wife, and I was a rebellious person. And then I sat down that evening, and I said, okay, if I have to pay tithe, I was sitting at the table with my wife. It was about lunchtime. We didn't have a post box outside. We had a door with a slit in it, and the postman used to throw the post through the slit. And we were sitting at lunch, and I said to my wife, okay, if God wants me to pay tithe, He will have to show me that I have to pay tithe. And I'd worked out on a piece of paper what my tithes should be according to two formulas. You know, we have more than one formula to work out our tithes. One that is more favorable towards us, and one that is more favorable towards God. And there are many things you can take into the equation. For example, your pension, well, that's a future income. And therefore I can deduct it, and this I don't receive, and that I don't receive. And so I had made a long list and worked out two things, and concluded that both of them were way beyond my means. I wasn't going to pay tithe. But there were two figures, down to the cent. And I said to God, well, if God wants me to pay tithe, He will have to show me. And my words weren't cold. You can ask her, it happened. A letter came flying through that door, and we saw it. It was the postman. Like normal, you go and pick up the post, you go and check it out. My father had died more than a year before. Everything had been done, his estate had been settled, all of those things. And there were interesting things with that happened as well, but that's not part of this story. And this was a letter from a lawyer about fees that we had paid. And he said, we have discovered after 1 year after checking our books that we have made a mistake and charged you too much money. Here is a check for what we overcharged you. And I took that check and I couldn't believe it. To the cent. Exactly, unfortunately, the higher amount. Exactly. So I said, okay, if God wants to pay His own tithe like He just did, that was my first check that I paid my tithe with. We were very sickly because we didn't know about health reform. Our chemist account was horrendous because we had all these crises with our kids and all these things. And it's just interesting that our chemist account ran in the thousands every month. And the next month, our chemist account was less by also that amount from what it was the previous month. So in a sense, God even paid his second tithe. And then he said, now get on with it, pay your own. And over the years, I've then learned that I cannot afford not to pay tithe. So if I'm in big trouble, the first thing I do is I pay my tithe. Otherwise, I'm not going to make it that month. We have to learn that lesson. And the priests and the sons of Aaron shall be with the Levites. This money is not for me, it's for the Levites. You know, and we like to argue, can I send this money to that person over there or this one over there? Because after all, you know, I don't want to give it to all these apostate people. Have you heard that? But it's for the Levites. That's for the Levites. And amongst all those supposed apostate people, there is also a gem here and there. Have you noticed that as well? There's always a jewel there. And if we weren't to pay our tithes, who would be the first to go if an area becomes apostate? The gem will go. So I pay my tithe. Thither I brought I again the vessels of the house of God with the meat offering and the frankincense, and I perceived that the portion of the Levites had not been given them. Wow. Was the tithe still being paid? Was the tithe perhaps not used properly? Yes. Who is responsible there? Me, if I don't pay it, or they, if they misuse it? Pay my tithe. I pay my tithe. Every month, pay my tithe. They may not give it to the Levites. It can happen. Now, this is not a universal thing, but it happens here and there. And we as a people are often very, very upset when we hear these things and then we withhold our tithes. No, don't do that.